The year is 1320, and the last bell of the day has just rung out over the lagoon. Let's drift by boat through the narrow canals of Venice, past shuttered market stalls and sleepy gondolas, as the city built on water settles, gently, into the dark. The bell is called the Marangona, the largest of 5 hanging in the tower beside St. Mark's, named generations ago for the shipyard carpenters whose working day it has always marked, first ring at dawn and last ring at dusk. It has no rival for the loudest sound in the city tonight, mostly because there is so little competing with it. No cart wheels rattle over these streets. No hooves strike stone. Venice was never built for either. Narrow lanes and footbridges connect its islands to each other, but the only real roads here are made of water, and the only real traffic moves by oar. We begin, as any night on these canals tends to begin, at Rialto, where the day's business is only now finishing. By mid-morning this stretch was loud with vegetable sellers, fishmongers working stalls set up close by the water so the catch could go straight from boat to block, and the merchants of the German trading house nearby, who arrive with their goods, have them weighed and stored under close watch, and rarely wander far from the building itself during their stay. By this hour, most of that noise has folded itself away. Awnings are down. Baskets are empty or covered. A few lingering voices settle accounts by lamplight before locking up for the night. The bridge crossing the canal here is built of timber, not stone. A wide wooden span with a section at its center that can be raised to let taller boats pass beneath, standing on the site of narrower crossings that came before it. It carries scars from 10 years back, when a noble family's failed uprising against the city's ruling council spilled into fire that reached even this far, though the bridge was repaired well enough that most people crossing it tonight likely give it no more thought than any other crossing in the city. On the far side, a network of small canals and narrow footpaths branches out into the 6 districts that divide Venice, districts that have carved up this city's geography for so long now that nobody living here could imagine it organized any other way. Drift into one of those narrower canals and the noise of Rialto fades almost immediately, replaced by something quieter, water lapping against stone foundations, the occasional creak of a moored boat shifting with the tide, and, at certain corners, a small point of warm light where an oil lamp burns in a niche before a carved image of a saint. The city pays to keep these lamps filled, and the parish priests see to it that they stay lit through the night, partly devotion, partly the simple, practical hope that a lit corner is a safer corner after dark. There is no grand illumination here, nothing like a lit street in the way a much later century will mean it. Just these small, scattered points of flame, spaced through the dark like the city's own quiet constellation. A boat much like the ones gliding past these lamps tonight is simpler than the vessel that will later carry this city's name around the world. A plain wooden hull, flat enough to manage these shallow, narrow waters, without the sweeping curved prow or the little covered cabin that will define the type in centuries to come. Right now it is simply the most sensible way to get anywhere in a city with no streets wide enough for a cart and no patience left for keeping horses on islands this small. Boatmen tie up for the night at fixed crossing points scattered through the city, where for a small fee anyone can be rowed across a canal too wide to bridge conveniently. The closest thing this city has to a ferry line, and one more reason the water here never fully goes silent, even this late. Somewhere in one of these quiet sestieri, in a house near this same market that has by now gone dark for the night, an old trader in his mid-60s is, this particular year, still alive. Decades ago he was captured at sea during a war with a rival maritime city, and in the prison that followed, he passed the time telling a fellow captive stories of a journey he claimed to have made, years earlier, deep into the east, to the court of a great Khan whose wealth he described in numbers most of his listeners assumed he was exaggerating for effect. Half of Venice still doesn't quite believe him. He is not, in this year, a celebrated figure the whole city points to with pride. Just an aging merchant with a reputation for tall tales, living quietly near the market that made his family's fortune, 4 years still ahead of him before his own death. Nobody recorded what he did on any particular night this year, and there's no reason to invent it for him now. It is enough to know that he was here, one more person among many, asleep behind one more dark window as this same evening settled over the water. Further along the water, past more of these small lamp-lit corners and more boats tied up for the night, the canal opens finally toward the wide paved square that anchors the whole city's public life. The pavement here is laid in a herringbone pattern of brick rather than the smooth stone that will eventually replace it centuries from now, and the great ruling palace facing onto it looks nothing like the lace-carved, rose and white marble facade that postcards will one day make famous. That building is still 20 years from even being started. What stands here tonight instead is an older, heavier structure, built up over centuries in a style closer to Byzantium than to the Gothic fantasy it will eventually become, a solid seat of government rather than an ornament. Beside it, the bell tower rises unfinished in its own way too, a work in progress across generations, still some 2 centuries from the exact shape and height it will finally settle into. Even this city's most famous landmarks, on this particular night, are still becoming themselves. The great basilica facing the square has already stood, in its essential shape, for a couple of hundred years by now, its rounded domes a settled and familiar sight against the evening sky, gold catching whatever light is left long after the market stalls went dark. Officials whose job is keeping the peace after nightfall are out somewhere in the districts tonight, one assigned to each of the 6, ready to be called on for whatever trouble the dark occasionally brings. Mostly, though, there is no trouble tonight worth calling anyone for. There rarely is. This whole city, built entirely on wooden pilings driven into a lagoon that periodically rises to remind everyone exactly what kind of ground they've chosen to live on, has never had the luxury of forgetting that the water beneath it is a constant, patient presence rather than a background detail. Homes here keep their ground floors ready for the sea's occasional visits and their real living space a level up, out of easy reach. Tonight the water stays where it belongs, lapping quietly at stone steps and boat hulls, doing nothing more dramatic than reflecting the last scattered lamplight back up into the dark. By full night, the canals have gone almost entirely still. A boatman ties off his oar and heads home along a narrow footbridge. A lamp gutters low in its niche before someone comes to refill it before dawn. Somewhere near the market, an old man who once claimed to have seen the wealth of an empire most of his neighbors will never believe in sleeps behind a shuttered window, one more resident among 100,000 or so who call this floating city home this year, none of them any more remarkable, tonight, than the quiet water carrying them all. There is no record of this exact night, no name attached to this particular stretch of quiet canal. What the evidence does show, in the bells that still mark the hours, the bridges built of wood that would only later become stone, the lamps kept burning corner by corner through the dark, is a city that had already, by 1320, found its own particular way of closing out a day. Not with silence exactly, but with water settling one ripple at a time, into something close enough to it.